In the heart of East Asia, for over 2 millennia, a single written language served as the bridge between kingdoms, the vessel of philosophy, and the keeper of collective memory. This is the story of classical Chinese, a language that shaped civilizations, preserved wisdom, and continues to influence a quarter of the world's population today. Our journey begins over 3,000 years ago in the fertile valleys of ancient China, where the earliest forms of Chinese writing emerged on oracle bones, pieces of turtle shell, and ox bone used for divination during the Shang dynasty. What makes classical Chinese so remarkable is that it's not just a language, it's a direct link to one of humanity's oldest continuous literary traditions. When we read a text from the Han Dynasty, we're accessing thoughts and ideas that have been preserved in virtually the same form for over 2,000 years. As dynasties rose and fell, the written language evolved from pictographs carved in bone to sophisticated characters brushed on silk and bamboo. By the time of Confucius in the 6th century BCE, classical Chinese had developed into a sophisticated medium capable of expressing complex philosophical concepts. The period from 500 BCE to 220 CE marked the golden age of classical Chinese literature. During this time, the foundational texts of Chinese civilization were composed, works that would influence not just China, but all of East Asia. The beauty of classical Chinese lies in its economy and precision. A single character can carry multiple layers of meaning. When Laozi writes the way that can be spoken is not the eternal way, he's not just making a philosophical statement, he's demonstrating the language's capacity for profound ambiguity and depth. As Chinese influence expanded, so did the reach of classical Chinese. It became the lingua franca of East Asia, the Latin of the Far East. Scholars in Korea, Japan, and Vietnam wrote their most important works in classical Chinese, creating a shared intellectual heritage across diverse cultures. Unlike alphabetic languages, classical Chinese operates on principles that seem almost mathematical in their precision. Each character represents not just a sound, but a complete concept, capable of functioning as different parts of speech depending on context. Classical Chinese is remarkably compressed. Where English might use 10 words to express an idea, classical Chinese might use 3 or 4 characters. This compression isn't just stylistic, it's fundamental to how the language works. Every character must earn its place. The language's structure naturally lends itself to parallelism and rhythm. Classical Chinese poetry, with its tonal patterns and structural balance, became an art form where meaning and musicality were inseparable. For centuries, classical Chinese served as the vehicle for humanity's most profound philosophical inquiries. The works of Confucius, Mencius, Zhuangzi, and countless others were preserved in its elegant characters, creating a philosophical tradition of unmatched continuity. What's extraordinary about reading classical Chinese philosophy is the directness of the connection. When we read Confucius saying, "Is it not a pleasure to learn and practice what you learn?" we're encountering his thoughts in virtually the same form his students would have read them 2,500 years ago. The language became a repository for concepts that had no equivalent in other tongues: wu wei, non-action; ren, benevolence; li, ritual propriety, ideas that could only be fully understood within the classical framework that birthed them. For over 1,300 years, mastery of classical Chinese was the key to power in China. The imperial examination system, established during the Sui dynasty, required candidates to demonstrate not just knowledge, but elegant expression in the classical style. The examination system created a unique meritocracy based on literary skill. To govern China, you first had to prove you could write like the ancients. This meant that classical Chinese wasn't just an academic subject, it was the language of political power. Millions of men devoted their lives to mastering the classical style, creating a shared cultural language that unified the vast Chinese empire. The system produced not just administrators, but poets, historians, and philosophers who continued to enrich the classical tradition. The influence of classical Chinese extended far beyond China's borders. In Korea, the Hangul alphabet was invented partly to provide an alternative to Chinese characters, yet classical texts remained central to education. In Japan, classical Chinese coexisted with native Japanese writing systems, creating a unique hybrid literary culture. Vietnam's great epic, The Tale of Ku, was written in classical Chinese. Korean scholars composed their histories in Chinese characters. The language became a bridge connecting diverse cultures in a shared literary universe. The 20th century brought unprecedented challenges to classical Chinese. Political upheavals, educational reforms, and the rise of vernacular literature seemed to threaten the classical tradition's very survival. The May 4th movement of 1919 represented a turning point. Young intellectuals began to see classical Chinese as a barrier to modernization, something that kept China trapped in the past. The question became, could China modernize while maintaining its classical heritage? The introduction of simplified characters and the promotion of vernacular literature challenged the classical tradition. Yet somehow, classical Chinese endured, adapting to new realities while maintaining its essential character. Today, classical Chinese is experiencing an unexpected renaissance. Digital technology has made classical texts more accessible than ever, while a new generation of scholars and enthusiasts rediscover the beauty of the classical tradition. Technology is revolutionizing how we study classical Chinese. We can now search through thousands of texts instantly, trace the evolution of characters across millennia, and even use AI to help understand difficult passages. The classical tradition is finding new life in the digital age. In China, South Korea, and Japan, there's a growing movement to revive classical education. Young people are rediscovering the intellectual and aesthetic pleasures of the classical tradition, finding in it not just historical curiosity but living wisdom. But why does classical Chinese matter in our modern world? What can a language developed for ancient courts and scholars offer to our global, digital age? Classical Chinese offers us something increasingly rare in our rapid-fire world, the discipline of precision and the rewards of patient study. When you read a classical text, you're forced to slow down, to think carefully about every word. It's a kind of meditation in an age of distraction. The language's emphasis on economy and precision offers lessons for our information-saturated age. Its integration of form and meaning suggests ways of thinking that pure alphabetic languages cannot match. Classical Chinese is not just a means of communication, it's an art form. The visual beauty of characters, the rhythmic flow of classical poetry, the balance of parallel phrases, all contribute to an aesthetic experience that engages both mind and senses. This aesthetic dimension helps explain classical Chinese's enduring appeal. It offers not just intellectual content but sensory pleasure, the satisfaction of elegant expression that transcends mere communication. Today's scholars face the challenge of preserving classical Chinese while making it relevant to new generations. Digital archives are saving ancient texts from decay, while new teaching methods are making the classical tradition accessible to global audiences. We're living in an exciting time for classical Chinese studies. We have tools our predecessors could never have imagined: databases, imaging technology, computational analysis. But we're also rediscovering the importance of traditional methods, careful reading, patient study, and respect for the text's integrity. The field is becoming increasingly international, with scholars from around the world contributing to our understanding of the classical tradition. This global perspective is revealing new dimensions of texts that were once seen as purely Chinese. Perhaps most remarkably, classical Chinese remains a living tradition. Contemporary writers still compose in classical style, finding in the ancient language a unique voice for modern concerns. This living tradition ensures that classical Chinese remains more than a museum piece. It continues to evolve, absorbing new influences while maintaining its essential character. As China's global influence grows, interest in classical Chinese is spreading beyond East Asia. Universities worldwide are establishing programs in classical studies, recognizing the language's importance for understanding not just China, but the broader human experience. Classical Chinese is becoming truly global. We have students from every continent learning to read these texts, finding in them insights that speak across cultural boundaries. It's a remarkable testament to the universal power of great literature. The language's emphasis on harmony, balance, and ethical governance offers perspectives that are increasingly relevant to our interconnected world. Classical Chinese concepts are entering global discussions about philosophy, governance, and human values. What does the future hold for Classical Chinese? As we advance into an age of artificial intelligence and global connectivity, will this ancient language find new relevance, or will it become merely a historical curiosity? AI is opening up fascinating possibilities for Classical Chinese. We're developing systems that can help students understand difficult passages, trace influences across texts, and even generate new compositions in classical style. But technology will never replace the human element, the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of understanding, the aesthetic pleasure of beautiful expression. The next generation of Classical Chinese scholars will likely be more diverse and globally connected than any before. They'll bring new perspectives to ancient texts, while maintaining respect for traditional methods. Classical Chinese stands as one of humanity's great intellectual achievements, a language that has preserved wisdom, inspired beauty, and connected minds across millennia. In our age of rapid change and digital communication, it offers something irreplaceable: the patience of deep reading, the precision of careful thought, and the satisfaction of timeless expression. As we face an uncertain future, Classical Chinese reminds us that some things transcend time: the power of language to carry meaning, the human need for beauty, and the eternal conversation between past and present that defines our humanity. The conversation continues, written in characters that connect us to voices from across the centuries, speaking a language that remains as relevant today as it was when first brushed onto bamboo over 2,000 years ago.
Thanks for watching.